What's up, YouTubers? It's me, Johnny. It's Valentine's Day. It's February 14th, 2022. It's been a chilly day here in Central America. I've been watching the news. Seems like the news is really bad. Canada has just introduced some new legislation to crack down on protesters in Ottawa. The United States may or may not be going to war. I kind of doubt it. Both Canada and the United States are making noises about shutting off people's passports for civil disobedience, stuff like that. Inflation's running almost 8% in the United States. So it seems like the world's gone mad. I saw a headline a couple days ago where China won't be processing people's passports for the next few years. Apparently that's to keep people from traveling. There's some good news though. There's more and more countries opening up to make it easier to travel to countries. Now, these travel requirements are constantly changing, but I saw a video a couple days ago from Vagabond Buddha. That's one of my favorite YouTube channels. You can go to Malaysia now. I think you quarantine for 7 days. The 7 days includes a hotel and some meals at a hotel. It's $250 per person. It's much cheaper than Thailand. Much cheaper than a lot of countries. Excuse me. You have to get a few PCR tests. The PCR tests are super cheap compared to most of the world. I'm hoping most of the world will copy this. By that, I mean, if you need a PCR test, it's like $20. Most of the places I want to go to, it's $50 to $100 to get a PCR test. But because of the rules constantly changing, I hate to say what they are, but some places in South America, you only need to get a PCR test. Other places, you need to have your vaccines and a test. Now, my very, very limited understanding is there's parts of Europe that are saying you can come to Europe without anything. Just come to Europe. It depends what country it is, though. There's more and more countries opening up, so you don't have to have a PCR. You don't have to have any PCR tests or vaccine things to partake in society. Now, you might have to have a vaccine or a test to get into the country. I'm not sure. I'm hearing conflicting reports. So if any of the viewers can just name one country in Europe where you can fly in, partake in going to a restaurant, a museum. I don't go to museums, but a museum or whatever you might want to do there without showing a COVID card. I'd like to know. I keep reading these reports, but it's not always clear to me if once you're inside the country, you don't need to do anything, but to get inside, you need a test or you need a vaccine card. I'm hoping in a few months, maybe 2 to 3 months, all this will be over. But it seems like even if it is over, there's going to be new rules and new regulations to control society from moving from point A to point B. And I think it's going to be all related to post-COVID stuff, because as COVID unwinds, there appears to be more bottlenecks in the economy, more protesting of these bottlenecks. Just to name one thing that's happening in the U.S., there's more and more people getting evicted from their apartments and homes if they didn't pay their rent. There's more and more people in Canada now going to be evicted. I have a feeling this could break out into a lot of protesting. I mean, I don't know, but it appears to me a lot of Western governments are getting ready to crack down on civil liberties because people are going to be out of the homes. They're going to be traveling within the country more. And so they want to put a stop to this protesting because of high prices, because of food, not just food disruption, but I keep forgetting the word, but getting stuff from point A to point B from ships and trains and trucks is getting more and more expensive, and it's taking a lot more time to do all this. Some of these problems won't go away because I think part of the reason the production chain is all messed up is because of inflation. Either inflation makes it worse, or there's other things going on I don't quite understand, but there's a lot of stuff that comes out of China that may not be going to a lot of countries right now. And then there's a lot of money floating around to bid up more luxury goods. So the luxury goods are coming off the shelves. Like if you buy Apple products, I'm not an Apple product guy, but the higher end expensive Apple products are still being made, produced, and distributed all over the world, including the United States. But some of the cheaper stuff isn't. And I think there's a reason for that because of the high cost of production and chips and moving it from point A to point B. So manufacturers are going to be producing for wealthier people. That's going to create more and more resentments. Meanwhile, the cost of food is going up, and housing and rents. I hate to even say what rents are, but I've been going online looking at Phoenix and some of the other places I used to live in the United States, and used car prices are through the roof. Rents seem to me kind of high. I keep reading people are saying rents are not going to come back down, so I don't know if they will or they won't, but it appears to me what's going on is big investment banks are buying up properties and apartments and houses all over the country, and then they're evicting people, and then they're converting them into luxury homes or luxury apartments or condos or things of that nature. I think that's going to happen more and more because the wealthier elites made a good chunk of profit from this COVID crisis, and they're going to need assets to move these profits into to protect themselves from inflation, which means these people who used to live in these places are getting kicked out or evicted. That's another thing I've been reading. Now, I don't know how much is true, but I've been reading in papers like even people that have been paying their rents are getting evicted. Even people who followed the rules and got extensions, got the government to pay part of their rent, they're still getting evicted because, right or wrong, legal or illegal, apartment owners are wanting to kick people out so they can remodel or renovate their places and use them for luxury apartments or more high-end apartments. Another thing I've been reading is more and more apartments in the United States. I can't speak to other countries, but there's more and more places in the United States. I think it was Minneapolis, St. Paul. Now, I never lived there, but I have a lot of family there. But I think in St. Paul, there's going to be rent controls now. So to get around rent controls, they want to get apartment owners won't accept Section 8s. I think that's illegal, but they're trying to figure out ways, legal and not so legal ways, to get around Section 8 because they don't want Section 8 anymore. And they're selling up their buildings to these high-end speculators and then rebuilding into luxury apartments because they don't want to have to deal with rent control. Now, I had never heard about rent control being in St. Cloud, but that's kind of interesting. I think as these problems get worse, there'll be more and more rent controls. There'll be less and less places to live that are cheap. So more and more people will be living in vans, cars, living on the street in tents. I don't see that going away. This is going to lead into a big problem, and I'm not sure what the government's going to do. Which leads me to talk about not just inflation, but the governments, not all, but many governments around the world say they're going to raise interest rates. I don't think that's good. Well, some are raising rates and some have raised rates. But I think, like a lot of Latin America that's been raising rates, they're getting close to stopping because their economies are really, really slowing. And there's going to be a lot of repercussions for that already. And I want to say Brazil, but it's not Brazil. It's in Turkey, which is not in Latin America. But Turkey already has this weird policy where they're not raising interest rates anymore. And they have a lot of, I want to say, exchange controls, either mild or a lot. I can't remember. And they're asking for citizens to turn in their gold voluntarily and getting local currency that's being debased. You're going to see more and more of that. Governments telling citizens to be patriotic and hold the funny money. And they're going to, if they don't own gold, if they don't own assets like Amazon, Apple, or Bitcoin, they're going to be left in the dust. And so far, I don't see any ending to that. Anyways, this has kind of just been a rant on some of the random things I've been seeing lately. Another thing I noticed, there's a lot of low-end jobs in the States. there's a lot of I don't know really what's available, but there's a lot of advertisements for jobs. I'll put it that way. But there are jobs for people who have skills, and the pay is quite high. But what's interesting, even if you make 50 or 60 grand, and you're a single person, you're not going to be able to afford to buy a home, so you won't be building up equity in the United States. No, that's not true of every city. I'm just saying of the big cities in the United States. So there's going to be a lot of, there used to be a thing called the misery index. It's inflation plus unemployment. And as unemployment creeps up, as the cost of living creeps up, i.e. inflation, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of men and women drop out of the labor market. There's a lot being said about people dropping out of the labor market. I don't really think a lot of people are dropping out of the labor market to get on welfare. That could be the case for some people. I think people are just dropping out of the labor market as a form of protest because they've given up. Much like dating in the U.S. with young men and women, they don't date as much anymore. People are just dropping out of society. People living on the streets, people living in vans and doing whatever they got to do to get by, living with other family members. But anyways, that's kind of the trend I see going on, because I see all these jobs and you wonder why people don't take them. And I don't blame them. If the average home is $350,000 to $400,000 in the major cities, and you're making 50, 60 grand, my understanding is you need 100,000 to buy a home like that. So you need two people to make that. So if you're only one, you under most circumstances won't qualify, but there may be loopholes like first-time homeowners, things like that. But what I'm getting at, a lot of people don't really want to be indebted to own a $400,000 home that could be worth 50% less if the Fed raises interest rates a lot. If they don't, they may want to own it. But then there's young people that don't want to be on the hook or live a debt life for 30 years, paying off a mortgage. And now I was looking at car prices. Now this is insane. I was looking mostly in Phoenix, I think. Again, I want to stress I was looking at used cars. Now, this is not a scientific thing, but I was looking at used cars for 30, 40 grand. These are all used cars. It's like, I couldn't believe it. I remember when you could buy a crappy home for 30, 40 grand in the 80s and 90s in certain parts of the United States. I remember when you get a 20 or 30 acres for 30, 40 grand way back in the day. I was remarking to one of my friends, it used to be you could buy land in the desert around Phoenix for $1,500, $2,000 an acre. Now I want to stress, this is land in the desert. There's no services on that in most cases. There's no electric up to the lot. There's no water hookups. There's no wells dug, nothing. $1,500, $2,000. Now in certain parts of Arizona and New Mexico, but mostly in certain counties in Arizona, you can park your car or camper and live on it legally. You can build on it without codes. But the trouble is, you can build whatever you want on it without codes and inspections, but whoever buys it from you can't, a bank won't fund anything like that. If you were to sell it, they'd have to be for all cash because it's not up to code. But there are a few counties where you still, up to this day, you can park a camper, whatever the hell you want on there, or you can build on there without building inspectors coming on. That's getting rare and rare. But anyways, those lots for $1,500, $2,000 are now $5,000, $6,000 now, and I haven't looked recently. But I thought when COVID came, all those prices would hit the bricks and go down a lot, but they didn't. And buying 5 or 10 acre plots of land in Arizona, even in the desert, is quite expensive. Now the taxes are cheap. The taxes can be $30 to $100 a year, but once you put something on the land or build on it, those taxes can go up. Anyhow, I'm not sure what to make of all this. I'm starting to see Canada and the United States. Here's one more thing. I was watching Catherine Austin Fitts. During the Bush administration, she worked for HUD. She's either the first or second in command of the HUD, I think the second. And she had the asset forfeiture laws on her, and I think she went to jail briefly. They accused her of all kinds of things, but she got exonerated. Anyway, she's famous for, like, she did an investigation of, like, the assets of the U.S. government. She pointed out publicly and embarrassed the government by saying there's an address she pointed out of a building on this land, and she went there and verified it. There's no building. There's no $90 million building on it that's being assessed. Anyway, she's famous for doing that and embarrassing the government, and ultimately had the government come after her. She was later on exonerated. But anyways, she's one of the few people I think who understands what's going on. I'm not saying she's always right, but she does have a good understanding. But she's pointed out the same things I've pointed out. Like, right now, the government can turn off your credit cards, your ATM cards, or the corporations. We saw recently in Canada where there was a GoFundMe for the Canadian truck drivers. The money was not used for its purposes. And ultimately, something happened where they were so embarrassed, the money was refunded back to people. My point is, you could raise money, you can protest all you want. If the establishment doesn't want that to happen, they will take your money, and there's not much you can do about it. In this case, you got your money back. But before that all happened, they took the money and gave it to their charities. But then there was such a stink about it that my understanding was they refunded money back to people who wanted their money back. My point is, if you do anything political now, they can take money out of your bank account. They can take your credit card, shut them off. So if you live overseas, your SOL, or maybe you just live in the States, your SOL. There's companies now that can make it hard for you to ever get a job again if you say something wrong on social media. It's getting to the point where you're going to see, I think, more and more people leave the country, both the United States and Canada. It's interesting. A lot of Canadians are going to Bitcoin Beach. I really didn't understand how many Canadians are in El Salvador right now. It's been kind of fascinating, being on Twitter, seeing all the Canadians who are in El Salvador now. Anyways, I still see that trend continuing where there's going to be more and more people dropping out of society, becoming homeless or living in cars and vans. There's going to be more and more people, in my opinion, leaving the United States and Europe and North America to Latin America and Asia. It's going to be more and more automation of things, or there's not going to be not many jobs for unskilled people. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds, but in a way, it's pretty depressing. I was just thinking about it. It's just sad. And we could be, I don't think we're actually going to go to war with Russia, but it's fascinating. Trudeau in Canada is considered, if the president of El Salvador had just done what Trudeau has done, they would be getting a lot of bad press, but it's Canada. So when the United States and Canada does some pretty authoritarian things, it's okay. I was just thinking, too bad we couldn't put sanctions on Canada, even though I don't believe in sanctions. But when first world countries do stuff, when third world or any other country that disagrees with first world countries do stuff that we don't like, our governments sanction them and shut off all the financial channels of moving money around, things like that, making it hard to immigrate. When it's the other way around, no one says much. I think you're going to start seeing more and more people vote with their feet. Anyways, the only bright side right now I see is, I want to say I stand corrected. Again, I'm not really too sure what's going on, but my understanding is more and more countries are going to open up where you won't need a vaccine passport to travel. Now, I want to see how it really unfolds in the next 3 months, but the only country I really know of that's like that right now is El Salvador or Mexico, but I do believe there's going to be more and more countries, because if you keep these controls on, a lot of people are not going to travel. They're just going to stay in their countries and travel, which I don't really blame them. And I don't want to get into it tonight, but there's a lot of, Vagabond Buddha made a really, really good video on how difficult it is to travel from Latin America to Asia with the COVID requirements. they got lucky. They got from the point A to point B okay. But when they landed in Spain, they found out they needed the booster shot. They apparently had the 2 shots, but they needed the booster shot. But they were told because how they routed their ticket, they didn't need the booster shots, but other people may need them if they route their ticket differently. That's what I mean. It gets complicated because you may think you don't need the booster shot, then you get into a place like Spain, then you do, and then everything I say tonight could change tomorrow or next week when hopefully Spain gets rid of all that. But my point is, some countries, like I was looking online at jobs, some countries in the United States, some jobs require you to get a booster, others don't. It's the same thing with flying. Now, I didn't really realize that till I was listening to their video, but it's so complicated and it takes so much time because there's not few, but it takes longer to get from point A to point B because there's not as many airplanes traveling. So it can take 2 or 3 days. When I say 2 or 3 days, I mean waiting in airports in transit. And then your COVID test runs out. And it's hard to know if it's still good or not. Now, they had made it, but when they were worried about it, because some countries it's 24 hours, some it's 48 hours, some it's 36 hours, I read. And then it depends if it's the PCR test or the antigen test. And then they were just making the point. They had no idea that you needed a booster shot. But apparently, I may be misstating what they said, but according to what they were told, the way they were routed, there was some technicality that they didn't need to have the booster shot. But if you're routed a certain way, then you do. It's all these technicalities I don't understand, like depending on how you come in the country and leave the country, and if you're in transit or not, that determines whether you need the booster or not. Now, in a sane society, if you're going to do all that, they would just give you the boost. They would just give it to the booster right at the airport, or they would just give you a $10, $20 ticket or $10 or $20 back test. Or in some countries, it's free, but we don't live in a sane society. And at some point, this is so freaking complicated. I just see the establishments giving up on it. If they don't, then we're going into a world that's going to be more and more draconian. In that case, I would say, in my opinion, everyone's going to be different. I can only say I would want to live in the Americas. I don't really want to live in Asia. I do love the Philippines. It's one of my favorite places, but if I couldn't go there, I would just be in Mexico, Central America, and South America, because I can do all what I want in those countries, including even the U.S. if I want to go back and visit or whatever. But I'm lucky I have the U.S. passport, so I can, at least right now, get back to the United States, no big deal. And a lot of what I like to do, I can do in Mexico and Guatemala, or I could do it in Panama, or I could do it in Colombia or Peru. And I've just talked about it before. I'd just like to see Brazil. I don't know if I want to live there, but I'd like to see it. Excuse me. Anyways, that's it for tonight. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment.